The biker garage wasn't a place people wandered into by accident. It sat at the edge of a half-forgotten industrial block in Cleveland, a square of flickering lights surrounded by concrete and chain-link fences. Inside, the hum of tools, the scent of oil and steel, and the low murmur of voices gave the place its pulse. But that evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, something different happened. A girl walked in, 13 years old, quiet, small, and clearly not looking for help. She came with a warning. Her name was Michelle Thompson. She had been showing up around the Steel Haven garage for a few months, never in the way that got in the way, just in the background, perched on a crate near the gate, eyes scanning the mechanics as they worked. No one told her to leave. That alone made the place feel different to her, familiar, almost safe. She memorized everything, the rhythm of wrenches, the way the men spoke to each other, and most of all, the silences. Silences told her more than words ever could. Jack Miller, the man with silver in his beard and quiet thunder in his voice, was the one she trusted without knowing why. He didn't smile often, but he never ignored her either. That mattered, because on that particular Thursday, Michelle had something to say, something that had been burning in her for days. She'd seen him again, the man in the gray van. He always showed up around 3 in the afternoon, parked 2 blocks from the high school, sat there with the engine off and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He never got out, never waved, just watched, always from a distance, always when the girl, Jack's daughter, Emily, was alone. Michelle didn't know Emily personally. She didn't go to the same school, but she recognized the girl from the photos taped to the inside of Jack's toolbox. Dark hair, backpack slung too low, the kind of girl who kept her head down and moved like she wanted to disappear. Michelle knew that walk, knew it too well. She had spent enough time in the foster system to recognize a kid trying not to be seen.
And she had seen this before. Not the exact man, not the exact situation, but the same patterns. In another town, another school, another girl who had something in her eyes that had gone dull after it was too late. Michelle had seen it coming then, too. She had told someone. Her foster mom at the time had rolled her eyes and said, "Stop making things up for attention." When the girl came back, different, quieter, smaller in spirit, Michelle knew exactly what she had failed to stop. She had promised herself never again. So that evening, she stood up, wiped her palms against her jeans, and crossed the garage. Jack was kneeling beside his bike, rubbing a cloth over the chrome like it was a ritual. Michelle stopped 3 feet away and said, barely above a whisper, "I saw him, following your daughter." Jack didn't react at first. He finished the motion, then looked up. His eyes were tired, shadowed. "What did you say?" She didn't flinch. "There's a man. Been there 3 times this week. Gray van, dented back door. Snake tattoo, green and black, on his right arm. Watches Emily after school." For a heartbeat, the garage went still. The other men kept working, but the rhythm shifted. Jack stood slowly, towering over her, but not trying to. "You sure?" She nodded. "I've seen him before. Different school, different girl. I didn't speak up then." She didn't say the rest. Didn't need to. He saw it in her face. Behind him, another biker stepped forward. Pete, the old-timer, his voice low and gravelly. "That tattoo sounds like Ray Collins." The name made Jack's jaw tighten. He's not supposed to be anywhere near this town. Michelle looked between them. She didn't know who Ray was, but she could feel it, the shift in the room, the weight of history being dragged into the present. Jack crouched down to her level. "You did good telling me, real good, but I need you to stay out of this now. It's not safe." She hesitated, wanting to say more, but his eyes were sharp, protective, and kind all at once. She nodded.
That night, as she walked back to her foster home, the air was cooler, but something felt warmer inside her. For the first time in a long time, someone had listened, and maybe, just maybe, she had made a difference before it was too late. The next day, Jack didn't sleep, not really. He stayed at the garage long after the others had gone home, sitting in the silence with only the echo of Michelle's words for company. A snake tattoo, green and black, a gray van with a dent in the back, watching Emily, his Emily. Jack had spent years building distance between the club and his daughter, trying to raise her away from the ghosts of his past. But now, one of those ghosts had come back, and he hadn't even seen it. By morning, the Iron Circle, that's what they used to call themselves, but they'd changed the name years ago to Steel Haven, had gathered again, not for oil changes or coffee, but for answers. Jack stood at the center of the shop floor, eyes sharp, voice low. He repeated what Michelle had told him, described the man, the van, the tattoo. When he finished, Pete let out a long breath and nodded. "It's Ray Collins," Pete said grimly, "no doubt in my mind." Ray had once been one of them, loud, reckless, too quick to swing fists and too slow to back down. He was voted out 2 years back after an incident at a bar that left a bartender in the hospital with a broken jaw and 2 fractured ribs. The club had made a decision then, a hard one. They turned their backs on Ray, cut ties completely. Jack had led the vote, and Ray hadn't forgotten. Now he was back, and he wasn't just drifting through town. He was watching Jack's daughter. "I don't care why he's back," Jack said. "What matters is that he's out there, and Emily has no idea." "We go to the cops?" asked Nolan, a younger member with more caution than bravado. Jack shook his head. "And say what? A foster kid, so a man sitting in a van? No contact, no crime. They'll take a report and shelve it. We need more. We do this quiet, smart. We gather what we need, and we make it official when it counts."
The plan was simple. They'd watch Emily from a distance, keep her routine normal, no panic, no disruption, just eyes on her every step of the way. They'd track Ray, document everything, times, locations, patterns. When they had enough, they'd hand it over to Detective Harris, an old friend from Jack's military days, who had earned a badge and a reputation for cutting through red tape. But to watch Emily without her knowing was harder than it sounded. She was sharp, independent, and lately more defiant than usual. After her mother passed, the bond between her and Jack had frayed. He tried, but grief had made him harder, quieter. Emily had mistaken it for distance. She believed he cared more about motorcycles than his own daughter. That illusion shattered 2 days later, when Emily came home, slammed her backpack onto the kitchen table, and demanded answers. "You have your biker friends following me?" she snapped. "What the hell, Dad?" Jack didn't flinch. He looked up from his coffee and met her eyes. "Watch your tone." "Watch my— Are you serious?" she nearly shouted. "They've been behind me all week. At school, at the store. I saw them in the alley behind the pharmacy. What is going on?" He gestured to the chair. "Sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want you to stop creeping around like I'm 5. His voice dropped an octave. "Sit down." She paused. That tone was rare. It carried weight. She sat, arms crossed, tight. Jack leaned forward, elbows on the table. "There's a man. His name is Ray Collins. He used to be part of the club. We kicked him out for a reason. He's dangerous, Emily, unstable, and he's been watching you." The words hit harder than she expected. "Watching me? Why?" "Because of me. Because I led the vote to send him away, and now he wants payback." Her anger evaporated, replaced by confusion and fear. "I thought I was being paranoid," she whispered. "There were moments I felt it, like someone was watching, but I told myself I was imagining things." "You weren't," Jack said softly. "You were right." She looked away, wiping at the corner of her eye. "Why didn't you just tell me? Would you have believed me?" She opened her mouth to argue, but closed it again. He had a point.
Then she asked something he didn't expect. "That girl, the one who saw him, who is she?" "Her name's Michelle, 13, foster kid. Been hanging around the shop. Sharp as a tack. She's the reason we know any of this." Emily nodded slowly. "I want to meet her." And just like that, the lines between them began to shift. Not erased, not forgotten, but blurred by something more powerful than hurt. Truth. Jack made a call, and 2 days later, the 3 of them sat at a booth in a diner downtown, pancakes between them, awkward silences, and a thank you that meant more than words could hold.
The meeting at the diner lasted just under an hour, but it shifted everything. Michelle sat across from Emily, small for her age, her shoulders hunched like she was always ready to defend herself from something invisible. Her hands barely touched the pancakes in front of her, though she hadn't eaten all day. Emily had expected someone louder, maybe more eager to tell her what she'd done, but Michelle was quiet, careful, the kind of careful you only learn when you've spent too long in homes that never really feel like home. "Thank you," Emily had said finally, not sure how else to begin, "for speaking up." Michelle blinked at her. "You're not mad?" "Mad?" Emily shook her head. "You probably saved my life." Michelle shrugged, but her eyes were too full for the gesture to feel casual. After that, the conversation began to flow. Michelle told her about the van, about the route, about the way Ray never got out, just watched. Emily admitted the moment she had felt something was off, how she dismissed it as stress or her imagination. They talked like survivors, because that's what they were. Two girls navigating a world that hadn't been kind, but hadn't broken them either. When Michelle excused herself to use the restroom, Emily leaned in across the table. "She doesn't have anybody, does she?" Jack looked out the window. "Not really." "That's not right," Emily said softly. Jack agreed.
That afternoon, back at Steelhaven, the plan came together. The club gathered around the workbench, the air thick with tension and purpose. Michelle returned with something unexpected, her sketchbook. She opened it slowly and revealed a portrait so detailed Jack felt his breath catch. Ray's face stared up at him, the scar beneath his left eye, the slant of his jaw, even the crease in his ball cap. She had drawn the van, too, the dented rear door, the partial plate number, the way the sun hit the windshield. Everything was there. "I'm good at noticing things," Michelle said, barely above a whisper. Jack crouched beside her. "You did more than notice. You documented. That matters." From there, they built the strategy. Emily would walk her usual route from school, but this time she'd turn down Industrial Boulevard instead of cutting through the park. It was a long, straight street lined with warehouses and few exit points. One of the buildings belonged to a friend of Pete's, someone who owed a favor. They'd use it as their staging ground. Bikers would be stationed at key intersections, 2 in a pickup truck near the north entrance, 2 more south, and a few scattered in alleyways and behind dumpsters. All would stay hidden, communicating by radio. Emily would wear a small wire, just in case, and Michelle, who insisted she be involved, was assigned a rooftop across from the warehouse, watching through binoculars. Pete would stay with her, just in case anything went sideways. Jack didn't want Michelle involved. He said so more than once, but she made her case with a clarity that left no room for argument. "I know what he looks like, I know how he moves, and I know what it feels like when no one listens. You need me." He nodded reluctantly. One final piece clicked into place when Jack called Detective Harris. The officer didn't ask many questions, just listened. Harris had grown up in the same neighborhood. He remembered what Steelhaven used to be, and he respected what they were trying to become. He agreed to stay nearby with a patrol car, ready to move the second the net closed. On the morning of the plan, Jack helped Emily clip the wire inside her collar. His hands trembled slightly. She noticed. "You don't have to do this," he said again.
"Yes, I do," she replied, meeting his eyes. "He made this about me. I'm finishing it." Jack pulled her into a hug. It was brief, but it held something neither of them had offered the other in a long time: trust. As she walked away, backpack over one shoulder, headphones in, Michelle's voice crackled in Jack's earpiece from the rooftop, steady and alert. "I see her," she whispered. "She's on Maple, alone." Jack straddled his bike and looked down the block. The air felt heavy. Every second stretched. He wasn't just a biker today. He was a father, a protector, and he wasn't going to fail this time. Emily kept walking, her steps steady, her breathing controlled, even though her heart was pounding like a drum. The chill in the air bit at her cheeks, and the long stretch of Industrial Boulevard yawned out ahead of her like a forgotten road. She kept her headphones in, no music, just silence, and let her instincts guide her. Behind her, far enough to seem casual but close enough to be dangerous, the gray van began to crawl forward. From the rooftop, Michelle's voice came through the walkie. "He's moving, 20 yards, getting closer." Pete leaned beside her, one eye on the binoculars, the other on his watch. "Steady," he whispered. "We hold till he makes a move." Emily turned the corner toward the empty warehouse. Just ahead, Jack sat astride his bike, engine off, parked behind a dumpster out of sight. Bones and Nolan had blocked the southern exit with their truck. At the other end of the street, Edwin and Harris were already in position. The circle had closed. Now all they needed was the final step. Ray's van slowed, then stopped. He opened the door and stepped out. He looked older than he had 2 years ago, more tired, more desperate, but the anger still burned in his eyes. He called out. Emily didn't turn. That's when he reached into his jacket. Jack moved first. Like a switch flipped, the roar of bikes erupted from 3 directions. Headlights cut through the early dusk, chrome flashing as engines surged. Ray froze, arm halfway drawn, and found himself surrounded. Jack dismounted slowly, hands raised, voice calm.
"It's over, Ray."
"You did this," Ray spat. "You took everything from me." "You threw it away," Jack said, his voice low and even. "You hurt people. You got yourself exiled." Ray's eyes flicked to Emily. "Then she pays for it." He lunged. Jack was faster. He slammed into Ray, knocked the blade from his hand, and pinned him against the van in one swift motion. Bones and Nolan were on him in seconds, securing his arms, holding him down as he thrashed and cursed. Sirens howled from a block away. Detective Harris and backup cruisers arrived just as Jack stepped back, breath heavy, jaw tight. "It's done," Pete said into the radio. On the rooftop, Michelle finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. Pete placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid. Real good." Ray was arrested on the spot, charged with stalking a minor, attempted assault, and violating a restraining order the club had quietly filed days earlier. The officers gathered every piece of evidence: Michelle's sketches, the audio wire from Emily, security cam footage from the warehouse's perimeter. It was airtight. As the sun dipped behind the concrete skyline, Steelhaven gathered one last time in the empty lot. Emily stood among them now, not just Jack's daughter, but one of them. Michelle, too, sat on the seat of Jack's Harley, the wind brushing her hair like she belonged there. 2 weeks later, Emily stood in front of a small crowd at the neighborhood center. Her voice wavered at first, but she held steady. "Someone saved my life. A 13-year-old girl saw what no one else did and chose to speak up. Michelle Thompson showed more courage than most people ever will."
In the back row, Michelle tried to shrink into her hoodie, but when Emily gestured for her to stand, she did. The applause was soft at first, then it grew. People weren't just clapping, they were seeing her. After the meeting, Pete pulled Jack aside. "My sister's been asking about fostering. Good woman, got a room. You think Michelle might want it?" Jack turned to look at the girl, now chatting with Emily like old friends. There was light in her face he hadn't seen before. "Yeah," he said, "let's talk to her." That night, Jack stood in the middle of the garage, surrounded by the people he trusted most, and spoke for the first time not just as a leader, but as a father. He talked about grief, about the guilt of failing to protect the people you love, about the strength it takes to believe in someone small, and the strength that small someone can give back. When he finished, Emily hugged him, not out of obligation, but out of understanding, the kind that only comes when walls fall. Steelhaven didn't ride off that night. They stayed. They helped launch a neighborhood watch. They escorted kids from the school bus. They became more than a club. They became guardians. Michelle moved in with Pete's sister 3 days later.
Her room had windows that locked from the inside, framed photos waiting on the walls, and someone who asked how her day went before bedtime. She'd spent most of her life invisible. Not anymore. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is speak up, even when they're scared, even when they're only 13. And in doing so, Michelle found something she hadn't dared to believe in: family.